Like, subscribe, and turn on notification for more amazing video. Respect!
"Our mom is still on the ship," the children whispered, but the guard dog wouldn't let the human pass. The evening sun cast long shadows across Mac Harrington's workshop as he trudged home, his German shepherd, Rex, trotting faithfully at his side. Being the only human on this backwater alien planet had its perks. No one bothered him about permits for his custom engineering work, and the locals gave him a wide berth, which suited him just fine. "Another day, another credit, eh, boy?" Max scratched behind Rex's ears, earning an appreciative whine from the dog. Living on the outskirts of Nelvara City wasn't glamorous, but it beat the hell out of military service. After 10 years as a combat engineer for the Terran Defense Force, Mac had seen enough bloodshed to last several lifetimes. Now he fixed things instead of blowing them up, and that made for more peaceful dreams. The tranquility of the evening shattered as a blinding flash lit up the dusky sky, followed by a thunderous boom that shook the ground beneath their feet. Rex barked sharply, hackles rising as Mac instinctively dropped into a defensive crouch. "What the hell?" Mac muttered, squinting at the bright trail cutting across the darkening sky. Whatever it was heading straight for his property. The object, clearly some kind of small spacecraft, screamed overhead before crashing with a deafening impact just beyond his workshop. The ground trembled, and a plume of dust and debris shot skyward. "Come on, boy!" Mac broke into a run, years of combat training kicking in. If someone was inside that wreck, they'd have minutes at most before any fuel cells ruptured. As he rounded the corner of his workshop, the crash site came into view. It wasn't a military vessel or commercial transport. It looked like a private shuttle, sleek and elegant despite being half buried in his vegetable garden. Steam hissed from ruptured cooling systems, and sparkling debris littered his yard. Rex growled low in his throat, sniffing the air cautiously. "Easy, boy," Mac murmured, approaching the wreckage carefully. That's when he noticed them. Small, barefoot prints in the soft soil, leading away from the crash and straight toward his house. His hand instinctively moved to the pistol, holstered at his hip. Living alone on the frontier had taught him caution. Inside his modest home, nothing seemed disturbed at first glance. The main room was just as he'd left it that morning. Tools scattered on the table, half-empty coffee mug, schematics for his latest project spread across the workbench. A soft whimper from the corner caught his attention. Behind his worn leather armchair huddled two small figures, clinging to each other like their lives depended on it. Mac lowered himself to one knee, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. Two pairs of ice-colored eyes, wide with fear, stared back at him from smooth blue faces. They were children, humanoid alien children with delicate features and long, silvery white hair neatly braided down their backs. Identical twins, no more than 5 years old, dressed in matching gray protective suits, emblazoned with unfamiliar emblems. "Hey there," Max said softly, keeping his distance. "Are you hurt?" The girls clutched small worn toys, plush creatures that resembled nothing Mac had seen before, and pressed closer together. One shook her head slightly. "Our mama's still on the ship," one of them finally whispered, her voice musical and trembling. "She told us to run and hide." Mac's heart sank. If their mother was still in that wreckage. "I'll help her," he said, rising to his feet. "Stay here where it's safe." He turned toward the door, Rex at his heels. But as he reached for the handle, Rex suddenly lunged forward, blocking his path. The dog's fur stood on end, teeth bared in a menacing growl directed not at the children, but at the door, at whatever might be outside. In all their years together, Mac had never seen Rex behave this way. The dog had saved his life more than once with those instincts. "What is it, boy?" Mac whispered, drawing his pistol. Rex continued growling, his body tense and ready to spring. Through the window, Mac could see the crashed ship, still steaming in the gathering darkness. Something wasn't right. Rex sensed it, and now Mac felt it too. That familiar prickle at the back of his neck that had kept him alive through 3 planetary campaigns. This crash hadn't been an accident. Mac glanced back at the frightened children, then at his loyal dog blocking his path to the door. He had to make a choice. Trust Rex's instincts or risk everything to save the alien mother. The air in the small house felt electric with tension as the moment stretched between them. Mac hesitated at the door, his hand still on the pistol. Years of combat had taught him to trust his instincts, and Rex's were even better than his own. The dog's warning growl hadn't subsided. If anything, it had deepened. "All right, boy," Mac whispered, stepping back from the door. "We'll play it your way." He turned to the twin girls, who watched him with those enormous ice-colored eyes. Their blue skin seemed to shimmer slightly in the dim light of his home, almost luminescent. "What's your name?" one of the girls asked timidly. "Mac," he replied, holstering his weapon and crouching to their level. "Mac Harrington, and this protective fellow is Rex." "I'm Siri," said the girl who had spoken, "and she's Neri." "Our mama is a Viri," Neri added, her voice barely audible. "She needs help." Mac nodded gravely. "I believe you, but something's not right out there. Rex doesn't growl like this unless there's real danger." He moved to the window, staying to the side of the frame as he peered out. The crashed ship sat in his garden, its elegant hull now marred with scorch marks and twisted metal. Nothing seemed to be moving outside, but the hairs on the back of his neck stood up just the same. "Stay here with Rex," Mac instructed the girls. "He'll protect you." Mac slipped into his workshop, connected to the main house by a short hallway. The workshop was his sanctuary, filled with tools, spare parts, and various projects in different stages of completion. But it also housed his security system, a necessity for a human living alone on an alien world. He activated the surveillance console, bringing up feeds from the cameras positioned strategically around his property. Most were standard visual spectrum, but a few operated on other wavelengths. One of his more useful military souvenirs, the thermal imaging camera, told the story Rex had been trying to warn him about. "Son of a bitch," Mac muttered. 4 heat signatures moved methodically around the crash site. They were bipedal, but definitely not human. Their thermal patterns ran cooler, and their movements were too fluid, almost predatory. They carried weapons, long rifles of some kind, and they were setting up what appeared to be sensor equipment at regular intervals around the perimeter of his property. Max switched to night vision. The figures wore sleek, form-fitting armor with full-face helmets that reflected the faint starlight. They moved with military precision, communicating through subtle hand gestures rather than audible speech. One of them approached the ship cautiously, scanning it with a handheld device. Another stood guard, rifle raised, sweeping the area methodically. The remaining 2 continued placing sensors in a tightening circle around Mac's home. "They're looking for something," Mac murmured to himself. "Or someone." He returned to the main room where the girls huddled together on his worn sofa. Rex standing guard beside them. The dog's ears remained perked, his body tense. "Siri, Neri," Max said gently. "Do you know who those people might be?" "The ones outside with weapons?" The twins exchanged a frightened glance. "The bad men," Siri whispered. "They chased us." "They want to take us away," Neri added. "Mama said they were from the authority." "What authority?" Mac asked, frowning. "The Vexari authority," Siri explained as if it were obvious. "They say we belong to them." Mac's frown deepened. The Vexari were one of the dominant species in this sector, humanoid but with distinctive, ridged foreheads and a reputation for rigid adherence to their laws. They weren't technically hostile to humans, but relations were cool at best. "Why would they think you belong to them?" he asked carefully. The twins looked at each other again, a silent communication passing between them. "Because we're special," Neri finally said. Before Mac could ask what that meant, a soft beep from his security console drew his attention. One of the sensors he'd placed along his property line had been triggered. "They're coming closer," he muttered. Through the window he could see one of the armored figures approaching his house, moving with cautious precision from shadow to shadow. The others maintained their positions, covering different angles. Mac's mind raced. He was outnumbered and potentially outgunned. His home wasn't fortified for a siege, and he had 2 frightened children to protect. He needed information, and he needed it fast. "Girl," he said, turning back to the twins, "is your mother still alive?" They nodded in unison. "She's hiding," Siri said. "The ship has secret places." "She told us to find someone good," Neri added. "She said to run as far as we could." Mac's gaze drifted to the window again. The armored figure had stopped advancing, apparently consulting some kind of device. They were methodical, professional, and getting closer by the minute. He looked at the twin girls with their ice-colored eyes and delicate blue features, then at Rex standing guard beside them. Whatever was happening, these children needed protection, and somewhere out in that crashed ship, their mother was hiding, waiting, hoping her daughters had found safety. Mac Harrington had left War behind years ago, but it seemed War had just found him again. Mac's mind shifted into combat mode, a mental state he hadn't accessed in years. He moved quickly through his workshop, gathering supplies, a few remote-triggered flares, some smoke canisters left over from his military days, and a compact pulse rifle he kept locked in a hidden compartment beneath his workbench. Old habits die hard. "Rex, guard!" he commanded, pointing to the twins. The German shepherd positioned himself in front of the girls, his posture alert, but calmer now that he had a clear directive. "I'm going to find your mother," Mac told Siri and Neri, checking the charge on his rifle. "But I need you to be very brave and very quiet." "Can you do that?" The girls nodded solemnly, their ice-colored eyes wide. "If anyone but me or your mother comes through that door, hide under the floor." He showed them a concealed hatch leading to a small storage space beneath the house, originally built to protect his more valuable tools from potential thieves, now serving a far more important purpose. Max slipped out through a rear exit, a narrow door hidden behind a false panel in his pantry, another remnant of his paranoid military days that was finally proving useful. The night air was cool against his skin as he crouched in the shadows of his home, assessing the situation. The Vexari operatives had established a perimeter, but they'd made a critical error. They were focused on the house and the ship, leaving gaps in their coverage of the surrounding area, typical of species that relied heavily on technology rather than instinct. Mac had fought alongside enough alien allies to recognize the pattern. He circled wide around his property, using the natural contours of the land and scattered equipment to mask his approach. When he reached the far side of his yard, opposite from where the nearest Vexari stood guard, he activated the first flare and tossed it into a pile of scrap metal. The resulting explosion of light and noise drew immediate attention. Two of the Vexari rushed toward the disturbance, weapons raised. Mac was already moving, triggering a smoke canister that billowed thick gray clouds across the yard. Under cover of the chaos, he sprinted toward the crashed ship, staying low and using the smoke for concealment. The ship's hull was cracked, but not completely breached. The main hatch hung partially open, warped from the impact. Mac slipped inside, pulse rifle at the ready. The interior was dim, emergency lighting casting eerie blue shadows across what had once been an elegant private vessel. The cockpit was empty, its control panels dark and lifeless. A narrow corridor led deeper into the ship, where living quarters would typically be located. "Iviri," he called softly, advancing cautiously. "I'm Mac Harrington. Your daughters are safe with me." No response came, but Mac sensed movement ahead. He rounded a corner into what appeared to be a small galley. A panel in the floor was slightly ajar. "I'm not with the Vexari," he added, keeping his voice low. "I'm human. Your girls are in my home, protected." The floor panel shifted and a pair of ice-colored eyes, identical to the twins, peered out from the darkness. "How do I know I can trust you?" A melodic female voice, tense with fear but controlled. "You don't," Mac admitted. "But your daughters ran to my home, and my dog is currently standing guard over them while 4 Vexari operatives close in. We don't have much time." After a moment's hesitation, the panel slid fully open, and a slender blue-skinned woman emerged from the hidden compartment. Her silvery white hair was shorter than her daughter's, cropped close to her head in what Mac recognized as a practical style for someone who might need to wear a helmet regularly. She wore a flight suit similar to the girls' protective gear, though hers was black rather than gray. Despite the dire circumstances, Mac couldn't help noticing she was strikingly beautiful, with high cheekbones and a determined set to her jaw. A small cut on her forehead had leaked blue-tinted blood down the side of her face. "You're injured," he observed. "It's nothing," she replied, her eyes darting toward the ship's exit. "Where are my daughters?" "Safe for now, but we need to move. The Vexari are—" A warning chime from a device on her wrist cut him off. Iviri's expression hardened. "They've detected my life sign," she said. "The ship's masking field must have failed." Outside, Mac could hear the Vexari regrouping, shouting commands to each other in their clicking, consonant-heavy language. "Why are they after you?" he asked, already calculating their escape route. Iveri's eyes met his, and Max saw both fear and fierce determination in them. "My daughters and I are genetically engineered," she explained quickly. "The Vexari Authority created us as templates for a bioweapon program. Our blood contains compounds that can be synthesized into targeted pathogens." Mac's stomach turned. The Vexari weren't known for biological warfare, at least not officially. "You escaped?" She nodded. "I was their lead scientist. When I discovered what they planned to do with our research, and with my daughters, I had to get them out." A thud against the hull interrupted them. The Vexari were attempting to secure the ship. "We need to go," Max said. "Now!" He led her to a maintenance hatch on the ship's underside, standard on most vessels this size, though often overlooked. As they prepared to drop through, Iveri caught his arm. "Why are you helping us?" she asked, her voice soft but intense. "You don't know us." "This isn't your fight." Mac met her gaze steadily. "Maybe not, but I know right from wrong, and using children as bioweapon factories is definitely wrong." Something flickered in Iveri's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or relief. Her fingers tightened briefly on his arm before letting go. "Thank you," she whispered. Together they slipped through the hatch and into the darkness, racing against time to reach the twins before the Vexari closed in. Mac and Iveri crept through the shadows of his property, using the lingering smoke from his diversionary tactics as cover. The night had fully descended now, and the distant lights of Nelver City created an eerie backdrop against the darkened landscape. "My house has a security system," Mac whispered as they approached, "but it's designed to keep people out, not detect if someone's already inside." Iveri nodded, her ice-colored eyes scanning the surroundings with practiced vigilance. "The Vexari are methodical. They'll have left at least one operative to secure any potential exit points." They paused behind a stack of spare parts, 30 meters from the house. Nothing seemed amiss from the outside. No movement at the windows, no sign of forced entry. But Rex wasn't visible through any of the windows, which struck Mac as unusual. The dog typically patrolled when on guard duty. "Something's wrong," he murmured. Iveri's hand found his arm, her touch surprisingly warm against his skin. "My daughter," she whispered, her voice tight with fear. "We'll get them," Mac promised, "but we need to be smart about this." He led her to another hidden entrance, a maintenance tunnel that connected his workshop to an underground storage area. It was cramped and dusty, but it would get them inside undetected. "Engineers' paranoia," he explained with a grim smile, as they crawled through the narrow passage. "Always have multiple escape routes." "In my experience," Iveri replied softly, "it's not paranoia if they're actually hunting you." The tunnel opened into his workshop through a panel beneath his main workbench. Mac listened intently before pushing it open. The workshop was dark and silent, but his trained senses detected a subtle wrongness in the air. A different pressure, perhaps, or a scent that didn't belong. He signaled for Iveri to stay low as they emerged. The connecting door to the main house was ajar, a thin strip of light visible along its edge. Mac raised his pulse rifle, moving with practiced stealth toward the door. A low-pained whine reached his ears. Rex." Mac's heart clenched. He peered through the crack in the door and saw his faithful companion lying on the floor, breathing but immobile. Beside the dog stood a Vexari operative, tall and imposing in sleek armor, holding some kind of control device. The twins were nowhere in sight. "Your animal is merely sedated," the Vexari announced without turning, his voice oddly melodic despite its coldness. "A remarkable species. It resisted the standard neural disruptor." Mac exchanged a quick glance with Iveri, who had moved up beside him. Her face was set in determined lines, but her eyes betrayed her fear for her children. "The offspring are secure," the Vexari continued, finally turning toward the workshop door. His facial features were obscured by his helmet, but his posture radiated confidence. "They are unharmed, as per protocol. Genetic templates must be preserved intact." "Where are they?" Iveri demanded, stepping into view despite Mac's attempt to hold her back. "Scientist Iveri," the Vexari acknowledged with a slight inclination of his head. "Director Krell will be pleased. Your value to the program remains significant despite your ethical divergence." "My daughters are not templates," she spat, "and I am not your property." The Vexari made a sound that might have been a laugh. Semantics. The Authority invested considerable resources in your creation. The return on that investment is non-negotiable. Mac had heard enough. While the Vexari focused on Aviri, he had been scanning the room, noting the operative's position, the location of his weapons, and, most importantly, a small movement beneath his dining table. The edge of a hidden floor panel was slightly raised. The girls had remembered his instructions. "You know," Max said conversationally, stepping fully into the doorway, "there's something you Vexari never seem to understand about humans." The operative's head tilted slightly. "And what might that be?" "We really don't like being told what to do." Mac fired in one fluid motion, not at the Vexari, but at the control device in his hand. The pulse blast shattered it, sending sparks flying. Rex immediately began to stir, a growl building in his throat. What followed was chaos. The Vexari drew his weapon with impressive speed, but Aviri was faster. She launched herself at him with unexpected grace, her movements suggesting combat training that belied her scientist status. She struck precise blows at weak points in the Vexari's armor, points Mac wouldn't have known to target. Mac circled, looking for a clear shot, but the two were moving too quickly. Rex had staggered to his feet, disoriented, but determined to join the fight. "Stay, Rex!" Mac commanded, not wanting the dog injured further. The Vexari managed to throw Aviri off, sending her crashing into a wall. As he raised his weapon toward her, Mac tackled him from the side. They grappled, the alien's strength surprising even Mac's combat-hardened reflexes. "You cannot win, human," the Vexari hissed. "The others will be here momentarily." "Then I'd better finish this quickly," Mac grunted, driving his knee into a junction in the alien's armor. The fight was brutal and swift. Mac took a punishing blow to his ribs, but adrenaline kept him moving. When the Vexari attempted to activate a secondary weapon, Aviri rejoined the fray, disabling his arm with a precise strike that Mac had only seen in specialized combat training. Together, they subdued the operative. Mac secured him with restraints from his workshop, while Aviri checked on her daughters, who emerged cautiously from their hiding place. "Mama!" they cried in unison, rushing into her arms. The reunion was brief but intense, Aviri clutching her daughters as if they might disappear. Mac watched them, something warm unfurling in his chest despite the danger still surrounding them. When their eyes met over the twins' heads, an unspoken current passed between them. Gratitude, respect, and something more primal that neither had time to examine. "We need to move," Max said, checking the charge on his rifle. "The others will have heard the commotion." "Where can we go?" Aviri asked, her arm still around her daughters. "I have a place," he replied, "but first we need to deal with our friend here and make sure his colleagues get a proper welcome." As they prepared for the next phase of their escape, Mac found himself standing close to Aviri, their shoulders brushing. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through him, a reminder that even in the midst of danger, other human instincts remain very much alive. Her ice-colored eyes met his, and he saw the same awareness reflected there, a mutual recognition of attraction burning beneath the surface of their desperate circumstances. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice carrying meanings beyond the simple words. "We're just getting started," Mac replied, his tone making it clear he wasn't only talking about their escape. They moved quickly after subduing the Vexari operative. Mac rigged several of his workshop devices into makeshift traps. Nothing lethal, but enough to slow down pursuers and alert them to intrusion. Meanwhile, Aviri gathered her daughters and what few supplies they could carry. "We need to make the Vexari believe we've fled toward the city," Mac explained as he programmed his home's security system to execute a series of false alarms across the property. "They'll expect us to seek help from the local authorities." "The authorities won't help," Aviri said grimly. "The Vexari have diplomatic immunity here. They'd simply claim jurisdiction over us as research assets." Mac's jaw tightened. "Then it's a good thing we're not heading to the city." He led them to a concealed garage behind his workshop where an all-terrain vehicle waited. A rugged, military-grade, with 6 massive wheels and a reinforced cabin. Rex jumped in first, seemingly recovered from the neural disruptor and eager to move. "The Drekon Wilds," Max said as they piled in. "It's a mountain range about 40 kilometers north. Locals avoid it because of the magnetic disturbances that messed with navigation systems." "And that's where we're going," Iveri asked, helping her daughters buckle into the rear seats. Mac flashed her a confident grin. I have a bunker there, fully stocked, completely off-grid. The magnetic fields will mask our presence from Vexari scanners. The vehicle roared to life, its engine surprisingly quiet for its size. They slipped away from the property using a back trail, lights off, guided only by Mac's night vision enhancement visor. Another military souvenir. As they put distance between themselves and the house, Mac glanced at Iveri in the passenger seat. The soft glow from the dashboard controls highlighted the elegant contours of her face, the determined set of her jaw. Despite everything, he found himself admiring her composure. You handled yourself well back there, he said. Those weren't standard scientific moves. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. The Vexari designed us to be versatile. Combat training was part of my conditioning, though I was never meant to use it against my creators. Their mistake? Mac replied, navigating the vehicle through a particularly rough patch of terrain. In the back seat, the twins had fallen asleep, exhaustion finally claiming them. Their small blue hands remained intertwined even in slumber. They've never known anything but laboratories and testing, Iveri said softly, watching her daughters. This is their first taste of freedom. Some first day of freedom, Mac muttered, being hunted across an alien planet. With a human protector, she added, her ice-colored eyes finding his in the darkness. They'll remember that part most of all. The terrain grew steadily more challenging as they approached the foothills of the Draken Wilds. Twisted rock formations loomed against the night sky, and strange phosphorescent plants cast an eerie blue-green glow across the landscape. The vehicle's navigation system began to flicker, affected by the growing magnetic interference. Almost there, Mac assured them, navigating now by memory and instinct. The bunker was nestled into the side of a cliff face, its entrance concealed by native vegetation and a holographic camouflage field. Mac deactivated the security measures with a series of coded commands, and a section of the cliff face shimmered and disappeared, revealing a reinforced door. Welcome to Casa Harrington, he said as the door slid open. Not exactly 5-star accommodation, but it's secure. The interior was surprisingly spacious, a main living area with basic furnishings, a small kitchen, 2 sleeping quarters, and a control room filled with monitoring equipment. The walls were solid rock on 3 sides, with reinforced alloy plating on the 4th. You built all this? Iveri asked, impressed. Had a lot of free time, Mac replied with a shrug, and a healthy dose of paranoia. He helped carry the still sleeping twins to one of the sleeping quarters, where Iveri tucked them into a bunk designed for one but large enough to accommodate their small frames. Rex settled on the floor beside their bed, apparently appointing himself their guardian. When they returned to the main room, an awkward silence fell between them. The adrenaline of escape was fading, leaving them suddenly aware of each other in this intimate space. Mac busied himself activating the bunker's systems. Environmental controls, perimeter sensors, communication jammers. Iveri watched him work, her eyes tracing the confident movements of his hands across the control panels. Why did you really help us? She asked finally. You could have turned us away, saved yourself all this trouble? Mac paused, considering the question. Humans have a thing about protecting those who can't protect themselves, especially children. He glanced toward the sleeping quarters. And I've never been good at walking away from a fight that needs fighting. Iveri moved closer, her blue skin luminous in the bunker's soft lighting. Is that all? The air between them seemed to thicken. Mac was acutely aware of her presence, the subtle scent that reminded him of night-blooming flowers, the graceful way she carried herself, the intelligence and courage that radiated from her. No, he admitted, his voice dropping lower. That's not all. Her hand found his, blue fingers intertwining with tan ones. The contact sent a jolt of electricity up his arm. Her skin was warmer than he had expected, softer. Among my people, my created people, we believe that attraction is the universe's way of recognizing compatible spirits, she murmured, stepping closer still. I've never felt it with anyone before. Not like this. Mac's free hand moved to her face, tracing the delicate line of her jaw. And what does that mean for us? It means, she whispered, rising on her toes to bring her face closer to his, that even across species, some connections transcend design. Their lips met in a tentative kiss that quickly deepened, unleashing a flood of sensations neither had anticipated. What followed was a discovery of differences and similarities, an exploration of alien and familiar territories, culminating in a union that bridged worlds and defied the boundaries their creators had intended. Later, as they lay together in the bunker's second sleeping quarter, Ifiri traced patterns on Mac's chest, her ice-colored eyes thoughtful. "The Vexari will never stop looking for us," she said softly. Mac's arm tightened around her. "Then we'll just have to make sure they never find you." But even as he spoke the words, he knew their sanctuary was only temporary. The real fight was just beginning. Dawn broke over the Drakon wilds, painting the jagged peaks in hues of amber and gold. Inside the bunker, Mac stood at the communications console, his expression grim as he monitored the encrypted channels. Beside him, Ifiri leaned against the console, her blue skin almost luminous in the soft light of the underground sanctuary. "Another one," Mac muttered, pointing to a signal trace on the screen. "That's the third emergency broadcast from the Vexari command ship in the last hour." Ifiri frowned, studying the pattern. "They're getting desperate. The encryption is deteriorating. They're sacrificing security for range." With practiced movements, Mac adjusted the receiver parameters, filtering out the magnetic interference that permeated the Drakon wilds. Gradually, a fragmented voice emerged from the static. "Containment failure in Sector 7. Specimens exhibiting accelerated mutation. Director Krell demands immediate return of primary templates. Planetary quarantine protocols." The transmission dissolved into unintelligible noise before cutting out entirely. Mac and Ifiri exchanged worried glances. "What does it mean?" Mac asked. Ifiri's ice-colored eyes darkened with concern. "It means they've lost control of the bioweapon program, without me to stabilize the genetic sequences." She trailed off, her slender fingers tightening on the edge of the console. "The pathogen strains are mutating beyond their containment parameters. How bad could it get?" "Catastrophic," she whispered. "The Vexari designed these pathogens to target specific genetic markers. If the targeting sequences destabilize, they could affect any biological organism, Vexari, human, or otherwise." Mac ran a hand through his hair, processing the implications. "So we're talking about a potential pandemic? One that could spread beyond this world?" Ifiri nodded grimly. "The Vexari have outposts on 17 planets in this sector alone. If their ships carry contaminated personnel..." The weight of the situation settled between them. What had begun as a rescue, one man helping a mother and her children, had escalated into something with far greater stakes. A soft noise from the doorway drew their attention. Siri and Neri stood there in matching sleep clothes Mac had stored in the bunker, their silver-white hair tousled from sleep. Rex sat protectively at their side, his tail thumping gently against the floor. "Mama," Siri asked, her voice small, "are the bad men coming?" Ifiri crossed the room and knelt before her daughters, taking their small blue hands in hers. "No, darlings, we're safe here." "But you're worried," Neri observed with the uncanny perception of a child. "We can feel it." Mac watched the interaction with a strange tightness in his chest. In just days, these three blue-skinned aliens had become important to him, more than important. The night he and Ifiri had shared had awakened something he'd thought long buried beneath years of solitude and self-imposed exile. "Your mother and I are trying to solve a problem," he explained, joining them. "Sometimes grown-ups look worried when they're thinking hard." The twins studied him with identical ice-colored eyes, then exchanged a glance that seemed to contain an entire conversation. "You can fix it," Siri said with absolute certainty. "Humans always fix things." "That's what the stories say," Neri agreed. "The ones we weren't supposed to read in the learning modules." Mac raised an eyebrow at Ifiri, who offered a small, almost embarrassed smile. "The Vexari educational database includes historical accounts of human intervention in various crises," she explained. "They're classified as cautionary tales, but..." But you showed them to your daughters anyway, Mac finished, a grin tugging at his lips. Humans are fascinating, Iveri said softly. Your species lacks our technological advancement in many areas, yet you consistently achieve the impossible through sheer determination and unorthodox thinking. The Vexari find it disturbing. Mama says humans are the only species that get stronger when things get harder, Siri piped up. Like a muscle, Neri added, flexing her small blue arm to demonstrate. Despite the gravity of their situation, Mac laughed, a genuine, warm sound that echoed through the bunker. Your mama's pretty smart. The moment of levity was interrupted by a sharp alert from the console. A new transmission was coming through, this one on an official Vexari emergency channel. Attention all sectors. This is Director Krell of the Vexari Biological Research Authority. We are experiencing a Level 1 containment breach. All non-essential personnel are to evacuate immediately. Research subjects designated E-Series are to be apprehended with extreme prejudice. Repeat, extreme prejudice is authorized. Aviri's face paled to a lighter shade of blue. They're abandoning the research facility. If they're evacuating, the situation is worse than I thought. Mac's tactical mind was already racing. They'll intensify the search for you. A planet-wide sweep, probably. We can't stay hidden forever, Aviri said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. And I can't let countless beings die because of what the Vexari created using my genetic material. Their eyes met across the room, a current of understanding passing between them. In the short time they'd known each other, a bond had formed that transcended their biological differences, a connection forged in crisis and deepened through intimacy. You want to go back? Max stated, already knowing her answer. I have to, she replied. I'm the only one who can stabilize the pathogen strains before they mutate beyond control. It's suicide, he argued, though without much conviction. He recognized the determination in her eyes. It was the same look he'd seen in his own reflection before every dangerous mission he'd undertaken. Not necessarily, Aviri countered. The Vexari need me alive. They need my daughters alive. That gives us leverage. Mac crossed the room in 3 strides, taking her hands in his. They were warm against his skin, a reminder of the night they'd shared, discovering the unexpected compatibility of their bodies, the surprising harmony of alien and human desire. If you're going, I'm going with you, he said, his voice low and intense. And we're not walking in without a plan. Aviri's fingers tightened around his. What did you have in mind? Mac's lips curved into a dangerous smile. Something the Vexari would never expect. Something human. As they began to formulate their daring plan, the twins watched with wide, trusting eyes. Rex standing guard beside them. Outside, the Drekon Wilds shimmered under the morning sun, magnetic fields dancing invisibly through the air. A temporary sanctuary, soon to be abandoned for a mission that would determine the fate of not just one family, but potentially entire worlds. The Vexari research facility loomed against the night sky, its gleaming spires illuminated by emergency lights that pulsed an ominous red. From their vantage point on a nearby ridge, Mac and Aviri observed the chaos unfolding. Personnel in hazmat suits rushing between buildings. Security forces establishing perimeters. Evacuation vessels preparing for departure. Securities focused on containment, not intruders, Mac noted, lowering his tactical binoculars. They're not expecting anyone to break in during a biohazard emergency. Aviri nodded, her face set with determination. The primary lab will be in the central structure. That's where I'll need to go to stabilize the pathogen. Between them, a small communication device displayed a holographic map of the facility, highlighting their planned route. The twins were safely hidden kilometers away in a secondary bunker Mac had prepared, with Rex standing guard. The loyal dog had seemed to understand the gravity of his mission, pressing his muzzle against Mac's hand before they'd departed. You remember the plan? Mac asked, checking his pulse rifle one final time. The girls' genetic signatures will register on their scanners from the decoy transmitter, Aviri confirmed. While they're scrambling to investigate, we enter through the waste processing system. Mac grinned. Nothing says human tactics like crawling through the garbage. The Vexari would never consider it, Aviri agreed, a hint of admiration in her voice. Their cultural aversion to waste is well documented. As they prepared to move out, Mac caught her arm gently. In the dim light, her blue skin seemed to shimmer with an inner luminescence that took his breath away. "If this works," he said softly, "what happens after?" "For us?" Avery's ice-colored eyes met his, filled with an emotion that transcended species. "Among my people, my created people, there is no concept of permanent bonding. The Vexari designed us for utility, not connection." "And what about what you want?" Mac asked. "Not what they designed you for." Her hand found his face, fingers tracing the contours of his jaw with wonder. "I want what I never knew existed until I met you. A family, freedom, choice." The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. In their brief time together, they had discovered a compatibility that defied biological differences. A harmony of body and spirit that had culminated in nights of passion neither had expected to find with someone so different, yet so perfectly matched. Mac leaned forward, pressing his forehead against hers in an intimate gesture. "Then let's go get your freedom." They moved through the darkness with practiced stealth, activating the decoy transmitter on the facility's eastern perimeter. Almost immediately, alarms blared and security forces redirected, creating the diversion they needed. The waste processing intake was exactly where Avira's stolen facility schematics had indicated. Mac pried open the access panel, revealing a narrow tunnel that reeked of chemical sanitizers. "Ladies first," he offered with a wry smile. Avery rolled her eyes, a human gesture she'd adopted from him, and slipped into the tunnel with surprising grace. Mac followed, sealing the panel behind them. The journey through the facility's underbelly was cramped and unpleasant, but mercifully brief. They emerged in a maintenance corridor 2 levels below the main laboratory, encountering only automated cleaning drones that Avira easily reprogrammed to ignore their presence. "The Vexari rely too heavily on technology," she whispered as they ascended a service ladder. "They never consider that their own creations might be turned against them." "Their mistake," Mac replied, thinking not of the drones but of the brilliant woman climbing ahead of him. A woman created by the Vexari who now used her gifts to defy them. The central laboratory was in disarray when they finally reached it. Emergency containment fields shimmered around several workstations, and warning indicators flashed across multiple screens. Only one Vexari remained, a tall figure in an elaborate uniform who stood before a central console, frantically manipulating controls. "Director Krell," Aviri said, stepping into the open. The Vexari spun, his ridged forehead flushing a deep purple with shock. "Scientist Aviri, how did you—" His gaze fell on Mac, who had emerged from the shadows with his rifle raised. "A human? You brought a human into my facility." "Your containment protocols are failing," Aviri stated calmly, ignoring his outrage. "The pathogen strains are mutating beyond your control." "Which is precisely why you and your offspring must be reclaimed," Krell hissed. "Your genetic material is the key to stabilization. Or I could simply neutralize the pathogens myself," Aviri countered, "without you harvesting my children for your weapons program." Krell's elongated fingers twitched toward a control panel. "The Authority will never permit—" "The Authority doesn't have a choice," Mac interrupted, his voice hard. "Either Aviri fixes your mess voluntarily, or this entire facility and everyone in it becomes a quarantine zone. Permanently." The standoff stretched between them, tense and fragile. Finally, Krell's shoulders slumped in defeat. "The console is yours," he said to Aviri, "but know that this changes nothing. You and your offspring remain Vexari property under interstellar law." Mac stepped forward, his expression dangerous. "That's where you're wrong, Director. While you've been chasing us, I've been busy transmitting evidence of your illegal bioweapon program to every major governmental authority in the sector, including my own." Krell's eyes widened. "Impossible! Our communications are encrypted." "Not from the inside, they're not," Mac said with a grim smile. "You should really change your access codes more often." Aviri had already begun working at the console, her fingers flying across the controls with practiced precision. "The primary mutation is occurring in the targeting sequence," she murmured. "I can introduce a neutralizing agent that will render the pathogens inert." While she worked, Mac kept his weapon trained on Krell, who watched with a mixture of fury and grudging respect. "You cannot comprehend what you're interfering with, human," the Vexari director said. "The advancement of our species doesn't justify enslaving another," Mac finished. "Where I come from, we call that a war crime." A soft chime from the console signaled success. Iveri stepped back, relief evident in her posture. "It's done. The pathogens are neutralized." As if on cue, the facility's emergency lights shifted from red to amber. Through the laboratory windows, they could see the evacuation procedures halting as the containment breach status downgraded. "Now for the second part," Iveri said, returning to the console. Her fingers danced across the controls once more. "Genetic record modification. As of this moment, my daughters and I no longer exist in the Vexari database." Krell lunged forward. "You cannot—" Mac intercepted him with practiced ease, restraining the Vexari director with a swift combat maneuver. "She just did!" Outside the laboratory, footsteps approached, security forces responding to the change in alert status. Their time was running out. "We need to go," Mac urged. "The maintenance shaft leads directly to the south exit." Iveri nodded, completing her work with a final command sequence. As they prepared to flee, she paused before the restrained Krell. "You created me to save lives," she said softly. "Today I have done exactly that. Perhaps you should consider that your creations fulfilled their purpose, just not in the way you intended." They escaped through the maintenance tunnels as alarms blared anew, this time alerting the facility to intruders rather than containment breaches. By the time the Vexari security forces organized a proper search, Mac and Iveri were already kilometers away, racing back to the secondary bunker where the twins waited. 3 days later, a small transport vessel lifted off from a remote landing pad deep in the Draken Wilds. Inside, Mac piloted while Iveri sat beside him in the co-pilot seat. In the cabin behind them, the twins played with Rex, their laughter a melody that filled the ship with joy. "The human colony on Proxima Station has granted us asylum," Max said, setting their course. "My old commander pulled some strings. The evidence we transmitted about the Vexari bioweapon program has caused quite a stir in the Galactic Council." Iveri gazed out at the stars emerging as they left the atmosphere. "And the Vexari? Facing sanctions and a full investigation," Mac replied with satisfaction. "They won't be creating any more templates for a very long time." Her hand found his across the control panel, blue fingers intertwining with tan ones in a gesture that had become natural and right. "The girls have never seen a human world," she said softly. "They're excited about the adventure." Mac smiled, thinking of the future stretching before them, a future neither of them could have imagined just days ago. "Humans are pretty good at adventures. And at saving people who need saving," Iveri added, leaning over to press a kiss to his cheek. "And at loving across boundaries." As their ship accelerated toward the stars, Mac reflected on the strange path that had led him here, from a solitary existence on the edge of an alien city to the center of a family unlike any other. A family created by chance, cemented by choice and bound together by something stronger than genetics or species or design. Something uniquely, wonderfully human.